Chapter 6 of The Man with the Red Beard by David Whitelaw. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne. Chapter 6 In the Land of the Tsar. They had already crossed the boulevard before I recovered from my astonishment. My first thought, that I had been followed from London, I dismissed as soon as it entered my head, on my recollecting that the men had been at their table when we had entered the café. Moreover, they had, neither of them, cast so much as a backward glance as they walked away. After all, what was more natural than that Felix Marazeff, his errand accomplished, should place as much distance between himself and the scene of it, before the hue and cry was raised against him? England offers a safe refuge for European revolutionaries, but she does not concern herself with their policy. Murder in England is murder, pure and simple, in which political assassination has no part, and as such is dealt with by the law without respect to motive. Surely no one knew this better than my friend with the red beard. Again, I was not sitting at the Place de l'Opéra, but on the Bohemian Boulevard Saint-Michel, in a district where one would look to find such gentry as Felix Marazeff, and the De Hocat was perhaps the most popular café. I began to tell myself that the coincidence was not so very remarkable after all. The idea of my acting the part of follower myself did not occur to me until it was too late to act upon it, and, on second thoughts, I was glad of this. I sensed that I would meet the man again, in Russia probably, and it would be foolish to thrust myself upon his company at this stage of the game. I was practically sure that, as yet, I was unknown to him, a fact that might put him, on some future occasion, at an immense disadvantage. Somehow I felt that this man was to prove my enemy, although his affair with Paul Bergstoff did not call for my interference. My friend had asked me to undertake a mission of help for the girl he loved. He had not asked me to revenge him in any way. Bergstoff seemed to me to be the kind of man who preferred to fight his own battles of that sort. I did not hide from myself that Felix had seen me in the Empire Promenade, and again as I waited on the steps of the Barbarians' Club. But in the former instance the glance had been momentary only, and in the latter there was the fog to be taken into account. No, I did not think that I had left any lasting impression on Felix Marazeff. I sat for some time turning the matter over in my mind. The tables round me began to fill with early diners, and about 7 o'clock I walked down to the Taverne Lorraine. Here I took my own modest dinner, and, on leaving the comfortable restaurant, I found that the question of how I was to spend the evening had been decided for me by the weather. While I had been dining, a thin, brittle snow had been falling, and the housetops and the arms of the trees shone white under the strong electric glare. A bleak wind blew up from the river, bringing with it a chilling sense of discomfort. I had intended visiting the Café de la Paix, where I knew I should run across some of my newspaper friends. Morin, of Le Matin, was regular in his attendance, as was Bertie Traverson, of the Empire, but the weather bred thoughts of my cosy room at the hotel, and I hailed a taxi. It was not until the evening of the 6th day after my arrival in Paris that I stood in the snow-covered square facing the Kremlin. My journey to the ancient Russian capital had not been devoid of incident, although nothing had happened that had any direct bearing on the matter I had in hand. We had broken the journey at Rotterdam, Bergstoff having had some business to attend to in the Dutch town. The night had been spent there, and we took the train which leaves the Maz station at 7 in the morning, and which should have landed us in Moscow a little after 1 on the following afternoon. It did nothing of the kind. The journey for the first part was uneventful and not unpleasant. My companion was in the best of spirits, and the thought that he was returning to his beloved country, and at the news we had gathered from a morning paper that his brother was alive and in a fair way towards recovery. Bernard Bergstoff told me a great deal of the revolutionary activity in Moscow. I learnt that in spite of the strikes and labour troubles, the city was experiencing a remarkable immunity from official terrorism. Great things were expected of the coming feast of St. Nicholas, when it was anticipated that the Tsar, out of respect for his patron saint, would make large concessions in the matter of reforms. Yet, while he was telling me, my companion shook his head. "You, as a newspaper man, are in luck's way," he said. "Believe me, it is the hush that tells of the tempest to come. But we are not ready. The outbreak will come suddenly. We shall be caught napping." At Alexandrovo the Russian customs boarded the train, and it seemed to me that the surveillance to which the passengers were subjected was far greater than any I had experienced on former journeys. Also I saw that the train was considerably late, and, indeed, from that point onwards we were constantly being stopped by signals. I inquired at a wayside station, where we stayed for some 20 minutes, the cause of the delay. The official, a big-bearded, babyish giant, shrugged his massive shoulders. There was talk of a strike, he told us. The eastbound train for Berlin was already 6 hours behind time. He was sorry, but he could offer no explanation. Perhaps at Warsaw. But when at last we steamed haltingly into the great Wiener station of the Polish city, there was no need to ask questions. The scene reminded me rather of people waiting at Clapham Junction station on a foggy night. Peasants, hugging shapeless bundles containing their personal belongings, shuffled aimlessly up and down the great platform, or stood gazing out over the metals with that peculiar cow-like expression beneath which the peasant of Eastern Europe hides his emotions, if, indeed, he possesses any. The station looked something like a giant's plaything, where trains were jumbled up just as the giant children had left them. They stood in sidings and in sheds. There were some with engines, some without. There was one solitary carriage, I noticed, shunted onto a siding where the metals were red with rust and disuse. This coach was full of more oxen-eyed peasantry who, having purchased their tickets, sat waiting for the railway company to fulfil their part of the contract. Possibly the next day would find them in the same position, and the peasants would awake to the fact that there was something amiss. Our train had come to an undignified standstill, half in and half outside the platform, and on our climbing down with our valises, we learnt the cause of the delay. The driver and fireman, acting presumably upon orders from the strike committee, had left their posts at a village a few miles east of Warsaw, since when the great engine had been under the amateurish care of 3 soldiers. True, our military amateurs had brought us in perfect safety so far, but they had taken the better part of 2 hours to travel 11 miles. They were young fellows, and they seemed amused at their new vocation. They were leaning over the rail of the engine-cab, laughing with their companions on the platform, doubtless in acknowledgment of the latter's ironic congratulations. We gripped our bags and mingled with the curious crowd in the big whitewashed booking-hall. Soldiers guarded the ticket office, and I saw the 3 men who had brought in our train join them and exchange greetings and cigarettes. I suppose they left the engine to take care of itself. Now and again a starting bell clanged dismally, but nothing apparently happened save an excited movement among the waiting people. No one asked for our tickets, and we passed out to a café on the corner facing the station yard. There were plenty of policemen, looking picturesque in their blue and red uniforms. They carried swords, and to their belts serviceable pistols were corded. They did not molest us, and I remember thinking that they were rather a fear-stricken lot of men. Indeed, I learnt afterwards that, on the average, one of their number had been murdered daily for some months past. My companion seemed somewhat downcast as we ran the gauntlet of suspicious eyes and seated ourselves at the back of the café. After all, as he pointed out, we were entering a maze, the exit from which might prove hard to find. Personally, he would be compelled to leave the train at a station or 2 before Moscow. He was known in the city, and the search would be a strict one during the strike. Besides, his presence would involve me in difficulties were it known we were together. Alone, with my credentials, all should be plain sailing, although the condition of affairs here in Poland seemed to point to worse things still in Moscow. We finished our refreshment and returned to the station. There was a train, a courteous official informed us, now being made up to take on the through passengers. When would it start? Again the expressive shoulder shrug which speaks all languages. The Petersburg train had been fairly successful. An engineer of a regiment quartered in Warsaw would be in charge of the train. He was a good man, the official told us, but daring. We took a look at the man as we walked to the barrack-like carriages in search of a seat. He was a dashing young fellow, with a daredevil air, and seemed vastly pleased at the job before him. I shall not forget in a hurry that wild ride across the border. Perhaps it was the knowledge of the man on the engine which made it seem worse than it really was. We screamed and rocked through the air, the snow blocking up the windows on the northern side and penetrating the crevices of the carriage. On through the night, past little blurs of light which were the oil lamps of wayside stations, through into the grey dawn and the wild wastes of snow. We had been told that there was a clear line before us, and we ran without a stop to the frontier. The fellow could drive, I will say that for him. At Brest-Litovsky, Bernard left me. He had friends near, he told me, and he would meet me in Moscow. I felt a sense of desolation as he climbed down from the carriage, almost a feeling of envy. Then, with a rasping jerk, the train moved on to continue its wild ride. CHAPTER VII.